Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today for part one of my interview with Karen Thomas. Karen Thomas's near-death experience was so profound and she had so much incredible wisdom to share afterwards that I decided I have to split this into two digestible sections. So today we're going to hear about Karen's near-death experience, and I highly encourage you to check back tomorrow when I will post the Q&A portion of our interview. A little bit of background on Karen. She was a physical therapist at Alaska Hospital and Medical Center in Anchorage, Alaska at the time of her near-death experience. She had injured her back and surgery was scheduled at the hospital where she was employed. During the surgery, the orthopedic surgeon accidentally cut a hole in the major artery in her leg, leading to her near-death experience. But without giving too much away, I'll just say that Karen experienced a visit to the other side with a spiritual guide and life review before choosing to return to her life. Karen has been interviewed several times already on the Jeff Mara podcast, on Sylvia's Spiritual Show, on We Don't Die Radio, and NDE Radio, all of which are available on YouTube, and I will link them below. She was also one of the many near-death experiencers included in the documentary Back from the Light. Now, Karen was a fundamentalist Christian before her experience, and in tomorrow's episode, I will be asking her about her views on religion, how they've changed, her views on Jesus Christ. So please enjoy today's session and don't forget to check back tomorrow for the second half. Karen, I'm so happy and honored to have you on my channel today. Thank you so much for making the time to speak with me. It's such a blessing to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that you reached out to me and you thought that my story would be of interest to the people that you have watching. And so I'm real happy to be here and to share with you as well.
Thank you. Yes, you have such a profound and in many ways unique story as well. So if you wouldn't mind, would you like to share your near-death experience with us?
Of course, I'd be glad to. My experience was from a long time ago. It was in 1982, actually. My husband and I had moved from upstate New York to Alaska, and we were living there, and he was working on oil field repair things. My career was as a physical therapist. So I was working in the largest trauma center hospital in Anchorage. And I injured my back. And I had also had a ruptured disc and a laminectomy 5 years before this injury. So I went through treatment, it wasn't working, and it was determined that I really needed to have surgery done, possibly another laminectomy, or it could possibly have been a spinal fusion. And so I was going into that unaware of which way the surgery was supposed to go or might go. And what I did at that time was we were attending a very fundamentalist church at that time. And so I contacted all the church members, plus contacting family members back in New York. And although I never did this with my previous surgery, I just felt like I really needed to ask people to pray for me the day I was having my surgery. And at the time, I was mostly thinking, because if I had to have the fusion, I probably wouldn't be able to continue working as a physical therapist. And so I was asking people to pray for me, gave them the date of the surgery, and said, pray that this is just a laminectomy, because I recovered from the last one really well. So that was the whole thing. And the day of the surgery, I was one of the first surgeries in the morning. And so my husband and both of my kids, and they were 9 and 6 at the time. My daughter was 9, my son was 6. They came in and were with me as I was put on the stretcher and brought to the operating room. And then they were sent off to a waiting room. I was brought into the surgery, had a big operating suite in that hospital. So there were multiple other operating rooms going on at the same time. And Anyway, so I was brought into surgery, and I remember the anesthesia being given, and then, you know, I was unconscious at that point, as you would normally expect. And then the next thing I really was even aware of was suddenly I was able to see that I was up at the corner of the room, the operating room, very near the ceiling. So close that I was like within inches of ceiling tiles in that operating room. And I'm up there and I'm hearing all of this ruckus and noise, and I'm hearing a man swearing, and so it drew my attention away from the ceiling area, and I'm looking around and back, and I see that they're flipping my body from being on my stomach over up to turning me over so that I was face up. And I'm realizing I'm looking at my own body, and how did I get up near the ceiling tiles, and why is my body there and I'm here, and just very confused and concerned, and seeing a nurse running out of the OR and being told to get transfusion blood. So I realized that, well, if I'm not in my body, am I dead? What's wrong? How can I be here? And my immediate concern, although I felt calm and not really upset that that was my body and all of this was happening to it, but I did feel concern about my husband and the kids. And I wanted to go somehow let them know that I was all right. And as soon as I began thinking that, um, my myself, my spirit, began to move, and moved literally out and through a wall into the hallway that I had come down to the OR. And then I was trying to retrace back to where we had come in. And so I drifted down this hallway past other operating rooms, and then through, there was like a double door thing that they brought the stretcher through. And I went directly through those doors and out into the other hallway outside there. And I'm thinking, I don't know where the waiting room is, but I've got to find the waiting room. Somehow I've got to let them know I'm all right. And as I was moving along in this other hallway, all of a sudden I realized that there was a man that was rushing back the opposite direction, from the direction I had come from. And a telepathic voice said to me, "Pay close attention to this man." And as soon as that was said, it was like I could see him up close, like it was almost like I was looking through a microscope. And the other funny thing is, I'm very nearsighted. You can see I wear glasses. And I could see perfectly, even though I didn't have my glasses on. And not only perfectly, but I was able to like zoom in close and see, oh, this is what this guy is wearing. This is what his hair color is. This is what his eye color is. And then I began to hear him thinking, and I could hear him thinking, I've got to get in there. I've got to get in there fast. And heading, back the direction I had come from. And then I also heard another man's thoughts that I hadn't even noticed. And that man was further behind, closer to those double doors. And I heard his thoughts saying, what does this guy think he's doing? He can't go into an operating suite, and because the guy that I was supposed to pay attention to, he just had like a regular jacket and just dressed like anyone, street clothes wise. And so I heard both interactions of their thoughts. And then I was able to watch the guy I was supposed to pay attention to as he came up to the double doors, and he paused near the other man for a bit. And then just a few seconds later, the door swung open and he went rushing on through. And as soon as he did, my attention was again on, I need to find my husband and the kids in the waiting room. And I started to think about continuing in the direction I had been going in. And it was as if I didn't have any volition over where I was moving any longer. And I felt as though I was being pulled up, literally upward, and up through the ceiling of the hallway that I was in, and through that ceiling to the next floor, and then through another floor. And so it's like I was on a tractor beam. If you've seen, movies where they have a tractor beam that pulls a ship and stuff, I was being pulled like that right out through the roof of the hospital. And once I was out through the roof of the hospital, then the direction I was being pulled became lateral, and I was being pulled over the city of Anchorage, which is where the hospital was located. And up high, about as high as like a small plane might be. And I was really moving fast. And I was thinking to myself, I should feel a difference in the air temperature. I should feel wind going by. I should be feeling these things, but I didn't feel any of that. When I got to what was the edge of where Anchorage sits on the bay, instead of going out over water, a whole like dark cave-like tunnel opened up, and I was sucked inside that. And as soon as I was inside there, I began moving even a lot more quickly than I had been prior to that, and just super fast. And it was very, very dark, except for in the very far distance, I could see like a pinprick of light. And that pinprick of light, as I kept moving so quickly, kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, until suddenly I just burst into this light itself. And when I did, where I had come out was a totally different landscape, than Alaska. It definitely wasn't in Kansas anymore or in Alaska anymore. And I remember looking down thinking, well, where is this place? Because it looks dark, or not dark, but brownish and rocky and dry. And so as I looked down, I realized that I didn't have any feet. Where I should have had feet underneath me, there were no feet. So this whole time, I must have not really been inside a body as such, even though that's what it felt like to me. I thought I was still inside my body, even though I had seen it on the operating room table. It was like I felt like I was in a different body, but I could not see any feet. So anyway, when I'm looking down, I'm seeing this rocky brown ground and a bright, beautiful light. And there was just such a feeling of calm and love, overwhelming love and peace, and just inexpressible feelings that burst into me at the same time as I came into this great light area. And I couldn't figure out, where am I? Because I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking heaven. And in my mind, as I pictured heaven, it was not a brown, rocky ground place. And so I was, concerned and worried about where was I. And then the telepathic voice that I had heard in the hospital hallway spoke to me again and said, look over here. And then there was a man that was climbing up a slope, off to my left, and up out of this brown rocky area. And then the guy who was climbing I was able to hear his words, or his thoughts also. And he said, follow me. And as soon as he said, follow me, I was just within a couple feet right behind him, following him up this slope. And again, because I'm thinking heaven and what I've learned in church, I'm thinking, oh, is this Jesus? And so I'm looking at him, and I see that he's wearing like a toga type garment that was like an off-white color. And then just a simple leather belt around his waist. And he had very almost black hair, and he had it pulled back and was tied again with leather so that it was almost like a ponytail type look. And on his feet, sandals, but the sandals had leather again that crisscrossed up the calves of his leg. And so I'm looking at what I can see of him, which is that, and I'm thinking, I don't think this is Jesus. This isn't the way I would picture Jesus to look. So isn't Jesus, who is it? And yet I felt a great deal of love and concern, just his emotion of caring about me and wanting me to come with him. And so he went up and continued up over the slope, and I was right behind him. And as soon as we got up over that edge of the slope, it was a totally different scene again. And then the scenery was lush and green and gorgeous, colors, unbelievable colors, and the grass and the flowers and the trees and the leaves. Everything that I saw was like it was lit from within, and it had an ability to be alive. Everything was alive, and the light within it was what made it alive. And the light emanated out for anyone to be able to see. And it was just so breathtaking. And as I was taking all of this in, again, I heard my guide's voice. I call him my guide. And he had gone on ahead. And so again, he said, "Follow me." And when he did, I was right up behind him once again. And this, where he was at, was on the edge of a river. And the river was not terribly wide, but again, it was alive like everything else. And it just glistened like diamonds and was just beautiful, beautiful water. And on the opposite bank of this river, I saw my father, who had died when I was 7, and my brother, who was killed in a car accident, and all sorts of other relatives of mine that I had passed away. And then there were also 4 people in addition that I had never seen, but I just somehow knew they were my 4 grandparents that had all died before I was born. And everyone was just so happy to see me. And it was just like a huge family reunion. And it was like, oh my gosh, she's here. Isn't it wonderful? And I wanted to get across that water to them so badly and be with them. And at that point, my guide spoke and he said, "Not now. We have someplace else we have to go first." And I was so reluctant about that because I just wanted to be with them. I could feel their great love for me and how much I loved them. But I didn't have a choice. I had to follow my guide. So he went down along this river away, down and around a curve in the river. And as we went around the curve in the river and went a little further, there was a huge opening. And in the center of this opening was an enormous building that looked very much like, if you think of Greek or Roman temples. And it had the huge white columns in front, and a huge number of stairs, just so many stairs leading up to the doorway into this building. And it shone like everything else, and was so white that it was almost like pearlescent. And when I got into this opening, there were also other spiritual people, like my family members that I had seen, only these weren't ones that I recognized. And some were at the foot of the stairs, and some were coming down the stairs. And my guide had gone further ahead and was up at the doorway into the building. And he again said, follow me. And so I was behind him directly, and these huge doors opened, and we walked into this big open area that went way, just, it was just so long. And on either side, there were books that were in bookshelves, and there were stories and stories and stories of them as high up as you could see on either side. And down through the middle of this huge room, there were like tables that some beings were sitting at, and others were standing at the ends. And there, in addition to books, there were old scrolls, and it was just as far as you could see. And my guide said to me at that time, this is where the book of life is stored. And he said, but we're not going to stay in here, we're going to another room. So we went all the way down through this whole huge open area, and then into the back and into a smaller hallway area. And as we went into this hallway, there was a door that opened, and we went into a much smaller room. And in this room, there were other spiritual beings, and they were all like around a big, huge conference table. And like they were waiting for us to come in. And although I couldn't tell you who these beings were, I felt that they knew me and that I knew them. They cared very deeply about me. And I also got the impression that they had helped me plan my life before I was born. They were like my soul group type of thing. And so anyway, as we came in, and I was there, and my guide was there too, they said, now we're going to review your life that you've lived up to this point. And when they said that, the whole center of this big like conference table type thing, it had looked almost like it was a clear screen in the middle. And once they said that, it was as though a hologram appeared up out of the middle of it. And I began to see my entire life, and not just see it, but relive it again. Like I wasn't just watching it go by, I was actually re-experiencing all these different moments of my life, and also experiencing the main person I was interacting with at all these major things that happened in my life. And I was able to feel what it was like to be that other person. At the same time, I was re-feeling how I felt. And it was just amazing, because I got to see so many things. I got to see where I was wrong about what I thought somebody else was feeling. And I got to see how they were affected by our interaction, and whether it was something good that they carried on to other people, or whether it was something that hurt them, and they carried that hurt on to other people. It was just an amazing ability to see the ripple effect of how you interact with other people, and that it's how we're all connected, and just amazing what grows out of all those human interactions. And when I had seen that, they said to me, you can stay, but you also have the choice that you could go back. And if you choose to go back, we're going to show you some things from your future life. And some of these things definitely will happen. Some others that we're going to show you might happen, and they might not. And that will be depending on the free will choices of the other people involved in these events, these future events. They could choose something different that will change the entire picture of what may happen if you go back. So all of that was shown to me. And then I know that something else happened, but I don't, it's part of my memory that hasn't been allowed for me to keep, I guess. And so I go from that point of being shown those future things, to the next thing I remember is being in a totally different room with my guide. And at that point, he's sitting with me and he's saying, first, I want to show you all the people you asked to pray for you. I want to show you their prayers. And so off to the side, I could see what were shown to me to look like musical notes on a score, a musical score, only these were going vertically. And each musical note was attaching to the other. And each one represented a different prayer of somebody that was praying for me. And I didn't hear, some people have asked me, did you hear what those musical notes sound like? And I said, no, I really don't remember sound. I remember the visual image of the musical notes. But I also remember my guide saying to me, each individual prayer has its own unique vibration. And every vibration comes together with another, and they're all reaching up toward where we are. And then he said, I want to show you the waiting room in the hospital. And so then it was as if I was looking through a clear ceiling of a waiting room. And I could see my husband was at the door of the waiting room, and the doctor who'd been operating on me was in scrubs and was also standing in that doorway and talking to my husband. And my two kids were like back at a small couch area that was behind them. And at that point, I was filled with all of the emotion of being myself and wanting to be with my husband and my kids again. And then I was shown my daughter praying, because when the doctor had come to the door, she'd been frightened and thought that meant that I had died. And she was praying that I wouldn't die and that I would live. And that was the last note on the notes that reached up to me. And once that happened, I just knew. I knew that I had to go back to my life. I had to make that choice. And so I said that I did. I wanted to go back to my life. And my guide said to me that you will be able to go back and you will remember enough of all of this to make certain that you believe. And you'll also have a sign that will convince you as well. And that will all take place. But you're not going to be able to remember everything that has happened. And you won't remember what we showed you of what will happen in the future in your life. Because if you did remember that, then your free will would no longer be free, because you would be influenced by what you remembered, you were shown, and expect that to happen, and not really choose freely. You choose based on that's what you think is supposed to happen. So that's the last thing I remembered of my experience itself, until I was waking up in a recovery room, and my husband and the kids were there with me. And as I was waking up in the recovery room, I still had this huge sense of love and peace that just enveloped me and was all around me like a protective bubble. And that, remembering everything of what had happened, I knew that I had had that experience. And at the same time, my consciousness of the operating through my brain that was half in anesthesia couldn't even figure out why I had been in the hospital. And I looked at this huge stomach that was all bulged out, because I had bled out on the operating room table and it had filled up my abdomen. And that's why they had flipped me over, and they were going to have to open up my stomach as well. And so I had staples all down the front of my stomach, from my breastbone to my pubic bone, and had this big stomach. And so with this foggy anesthesia brain, I'm looking at that and thinking, did I just have a baby? Did I have a cesarean or something? And I mean, I totally was unconnected to even remembering that I was having back surgery. But at the same time, I had this crystal clear memory of my whole near-death experience that I had just had. So it was just really weird. And then I was in the hospital for 12 days. I was in ICU, and then I was out on a room on the, one of the wards. And during the time frame I was in the hospital, a man came in to check on me. Doctors were doing follow-up and stuff was going on. And when he walked in, as soon as he walked in, I realized it was the man that I'd been told to pay attention to in the hallway, and that he was the surgeon that had saved my life. He had been called in from his office, and so he was in street clothes when he got to the hospital. I didn't know all of that until afterward. All I knew was that I had seen him during my near-death experience that way. And then here he was in my operating room checking up on me. And then after I got home from the hospital and had to go and have those staples removed, I had my husband come with me. And I wanted to ask him about what I had seen during my near-death experience. And so I told him, this is what I saw, when that happened. I saw you in a hallway, and I saw you with this outfit on and doing, heading toward the hospital, operating room doors. And he said, how could you know that? And that was when he told me that he had been in his office seeing patients. He had been paged to come in stat, and that he came in and did a surgery to repair my artery. And that was what saved my life. So that was my whole experience.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Not at all. No.